Welcome to the Black Appalachian Coalition's podcast entitled Blac Re-Membering, where we will bring to you the heavy and the hope across the Ohio River Valley. We want to remember who we are, where we've come from. We want to speak to the oral history of what we've done, what we've achieved. We want to speak to the ills that we have experienced, while also finding solutions to those problems, those issues. We want to deal with the narrative that has kept us deeply rooted in despair. Now we want to punch through that narrative and stand up and say, we are remembering our Black past, and we are rooted, and we are here to stay. Welcome to Blac Re-Membering. We hope that you find your place, your space, and your voice in this podcast.
Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Blac Re-Membering podcast, where we highlight the heavy and the hope. The Black Appalachian Coalition, or BLAC, is a nonprofit organization founded by Bishop Marcia Dinkins. My name is NitaJade, and I'm a cultural worker and narrative organizer for BLAC. My role is to gather the lived experiences of African American people in Appalachia to amplify our narratives with the goal of dispelling our historical, cultural, and regional erasure. Black people are, have been, and will continue to be Appalachian. BLAC puts forth our voices and makes our lived experiences visible. Our hope is that this visibility will aid in our efforts to create policy changes that benefit the Black Appalachian community. Today, I am honored to host two living legends, Ms. Symerdar Baskin and her husband, Professor Dr. Andrew Baskin. Y'all are going to hear me say some variation of the word honor so many times in this episode. I cannot emphasize their greatness enough. When I think of the people who've made multi-generational impacts, the people who have put in the work with a capital W for the Black community, making moves seen and unseen, I think of Andrew and Symerdar Baskin. The Baskins were recently awarded by the Berea College Alumni Association, so I'll read a bit from their website. Quote, "The Berea College Alumni Association presented Andrew Baskin with the Rodney C. Bussey Award of Special Merit during the Black Student Union pageant. And for context, the Rodney C. Bussey Award of Special Merit is given to alumni who have been employed by the college in recognition of their outstanding service to, demonstrated loyal interest in, and extraordinary quality of work for Berea College excellence. Ms. Symerdar was presented with an Honorary Alumna Award. And for context, honorary alumnus awards are given to non-alumni in recognition of their outstanding service to and demonstrated loyal interest in Berea College. Again, excellence. Andrew Baskin came to Berea as a student in 1968. He majored in history and graduated in 72 with enough honors for a double major in Black Studies. In 1975, he earned a master's degree in history at Virginia Tech University and went on to teach at Ferrum College in Virginia. Mrs. and Mr. Baskin moved to Berea in the early 80s. Professor Baskin became the first director of the Black Cultural Center of Berea and joined the college faculty. Through his contributions to Berea, and by contributions, I mean disrupting the norm and fighting the good fight, African and African American studies became a distinctive program of academic study at the college. Ms. Symerdar loves the campus and students and often found herself serving as a host to students who were unable to go home for the holidays. I was one of those students. The food was bomb, just so y'all know. And the Baskins keep in touch with many of us till this day. In 2018, they decided to establish an endowed scholarship to help students and to carry their dedication into the future. The scholarship is intended to promote continuing education and research in African American culture and history. The Andrew and Symerdar Baskin Student Research Fund awarded its first scholarship last year in 2022, end quote. Ms. Symerdar and Professor Dr. Baskin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for that excellent introduction.
And thank you for your time and willingness and patience. And thank you for being willing to share with our Heavy Hope listeners. I'm going to respect y'all's time by diving right into these questions, or else I will sit here and gush over y'all and go on tangents down memory lane, and y'all know I can ramble. Now, Ms. Symerdar, I know you were raised in Virginia, and Professor Baskin, I know you were raised in Tennessee, but how would y'all describe the cities or towns in which you were born and raised?
Small town, very segregated when it came to housing. A lot like Berea in the sense that the population was real small. I lived in the city of the small town. No country girl, but it was a small town. Loved it. Everybody in the neighborhood, that village that it takes to raise children, that's what we had.
Symerdar forgot to mention she was raised in Suffolk, Virginia, and the Tidewater area. I was raised in Alcoa, Tennessee, which was a company town that was founded by the Aluminum Company of America, which no longer exists. I think it was bought out by a company called Arconic, but Alcoa still exists. Like Symerdar, I was raised in a segregated neighborhood. And in fact, it was called the 13 Streets. And at that time, you could tell when you were entering the 13 Streets because you crossed the railroad track. And for the first 10 years, I attended Charles M. Hall School, which was an all-Black school, segregated. But I think I would agree with Symerdar. There was a sense of community during that time period. I'll always say that our parents did not have email. They didn't have cell phone. They didn't have text messages. They didn't have group chat. But if you did something in school, somehow that news made it home before you did. And I know your generation thinks we're exaggerating, but I am not exaggerating. So there was much more like an African village in terms of the neighborhood, the neighbors, the village raised the children, and you understood that.
Thank you. You mentioned the aluminum company that established the town and the difference in infrastructure that let you know which side of town you were going to. So I'm wondering, in addition to like those details, did you notice any injustices or maybe sustainability related? Not the chuckle.
Go ahead. I'll let Symerdar go first.
Well, the most obvious one that I can remember that right off the top, you turned into the main street coming into the, I guess we would call it a neighborhood. It was not really a subdivision. That street was paved. When you turn on the streets, the side streets, it was red, hard, bumpy, muddy clay. No sidewalks. We did have a street light at the end of the street, which was your signal to go home. When the street light blinked, you better head, because when the blinking was complete, you were late, and a mother was gonna come to the door and escort you very nicely to the house.
That is very true. And I would agree with Symerdar about Alcoa. You knew that you were in a segregated community. And what the aluminum company did in Alcoa to attract African Americans from the South to come to Alcoa and work there, because my family was part of the Great Migration. And I think Symerdar's family might have been part of it in Virginia, was the aluminum company built the houses, the aluminum company built churches, the aluminum company even provided a cemetery for the African Americans. The aluminum company initially provided Charles M. Hall. So it's interesting that it was a segregated community, but if you go back and talk to many African Americans in our generation, they would say to you, they felt a sense of community in those communities, in those segregated communities that they don't feel now. So when it's almost like when we lost Charles and Paul, we lost our school. And I think for Symerdar, when they were bused away from the school, was called John F. Kennedy, they lost their school. So it's, in one hand, yes, people wanted the civil rights movement, but I think what they wanted, as so many would say, told me when I did an interview, oral history interview, they just wanted the right to be treated equal. They wanted to be at the table, but that didn't necessarily mean that they had to give up or wanted to give up everything that was theirs. They just wanted the option. And unfortunately, I think both of us came through at a time period where a desegregation, and as you know, I don't use the word integration, was that Black people had to give up everything to go into white communities, and the white communities really did not want us.
And they didn't give up anything.
Right. One of the oral histories I did was with a gentleman who went to Maryville High School in Maryville, Tennessee. He was one of the first 5 to desegregate Maryville High School. After he graduated, he went into the service and went into Vietnam, and he went to Vietnam, and he became a mental health counselor. I interviewed him 2 or 3 times, and he said something that initially, it shocked me, but the more and more I think about it, it's true. He said the best training for what he dealt with in Vietnam was being one of the first 5 African Americans in that predominantly white school, because he said they had to go through so much every day.
Wow.
Mentally, but they could not respond, because they knew if they responded or reacted in any way, they would be the ones that would be in trouble. So he learned how to control his emotion, and he said that was excellent training for Vietnam. And like I said, he was a mental health counselor. In part, if you talk to many African Americans who were the first ones to desegregate the schools, they won't talk about it. They won't talk about their experiences. So I think they would have what we would call PTSD now. They just don't want to talk about what they went through.
And that psychological damage, or that whatever is internalized, is often not talked about, and that gets passed down generationally. So I want to move on to this next question, and I'm very interested to see how y'all feel. Ms. Symerdar, I remember that you clarified that you were a city girl and you weren't from the country, so I want to hear your answer to this question. Are y'all familiar with Frank S. Walker's term Appalachian, like the combination of Afro and Appalachian? And do either of you identify as Appalachian?
I don't consider myself an Appalachian. We have lived in this state for almost 40 years. And when you ask me where I'm from, I don't say Berea, Kentucky. Suffolk, Virginia will always be home. And when he talks and the characteristics that we're supposed to have because of our new name really don't exist in my mind. Because when we were talking about the schools and having to be prepared, unfortunately or fortunately, my father was one of those that believed if somebody did you wrong, you stood up to them. And one day I got on the bus to come home and I sat down. And this little white boy and his girlfriend just stood at my seat and said, "You're in my seat." I was like, "Excuse you? You're in my seat." "Well, I don't think so. I don't think your daddy owns this bus." So the bus driver tells me to get up or get off. Mind you, we were on public highway, pulled out from school, and being probably a little naive, but no fear, when you're naive, you don't fear anything. You just think you can do whatever. So I said, well, just open the door. Got off the bus. There was a friend of mine. She said, well, I'm not staying. I'm going to. And that was a game changer for me. This was my first year, my junior year. I was one of those sort of picked to make the transition. And I just wasn't afraid. And consequently, you know, my father shows up the next morning in his 3-piece suit and ready to have her head. And obviously they must have discussed this all night because the superintendent had a plan. Well, we'll fire her. Daddy said, no, I don't want you to fire her. I just don't want her to drive my daughter's bus anymore. So Appalachia is not who I perceive myself to be. So he can't change that.
Well, my answer is no, but for a very different reason. And my entire life has been spent in Appalachia. Being raised in Alcoa, which is near the Great Smoky Mountains. Came to Berea. Now, technically, I'm not sure if Berea is in Appalachia, but it is part of the Madison County. It's part of the Appalachian Regional Commission designation of Appalachia. And then I spent the 10 and a half years at Ferrum. Before Frank, invented that term. Bill Turner and Ed Cabell were doing work, a lot of work in the study of Black Appalachians. And, you know, in fact, Bill had the seminal work, the book, Black Appalachia, Blacks in Appalachia. So, and I have spent a lot of time up in Eastern Kentucky. Part of the reason was because I was moderator of the London district of a consortium of Black Baptist churches. People there do not call themselves Appalachian. People where I'm from in Blount County don't call themselves Appalachian. People, Black Americans in this area don't call themselves Appalachian. Now they might call themselves African Americans. They might call themselves Black. A few would use the word Appalachia, but Appalachia to me is a term that was forced upon people. And you just don't see the people, the African Americans who live in Appalachia using that term to describe themselves. Now, I'm not as critical of Frank as I know some others, in particular Bill Turner. I just put it out there because if you read his book, it's very clear what he feels. So I give Frank credit for bringing attention to African Americans in the mountains or Blacks in the mountains, but we were not invisible. And the study was already being done before Frank. So yes, I definitely identify as an Appalachian. You want to know when I found out I was an Appalachian? When I came to Berea.
So yay, I'm in region, except me.
Yeah, but because I think part of it is, of course, the stereotype of Appalachia. And too often the stereotype of Appalachia would be something like we were going up to Beverly Hillbilly. Well, I didn't want to be identified that way. But there are many African Americans, if you go up in the mountains, who are much more like that than they are like, quote unquote, cityfied Black folks. And that's the reason it's sometimes hard to recruit African Americans from the more rural parts of the region, is because they come to Berea. They don't necessarily identify with the white students, but they don't also necessarily identify with the Black students who are from Birmingham and Greenville and Asheville. So my answer is still no. Do I give Frank credit? Yes, but the scholarship was occurring way before Frank Walker came on the scene. And I also believe that if you're going to be an Appalachian, it needs to be people from that area. You need to have the lived experiences. Like
Mm.
people love to say they're Native Americans. Well, they might be. I don't buy that unless you have the lived experience. And if you're going to be an Appalachian, you need to have lived in the mountains. You need to be able to go up and relate to the people in the mountains, be there for their funerals, be there for their weddings, be there for their church services. And many of the people who say that they're Appalachians can't do that. They would be out. They feel they would be out of place. Yeah. So I think, we both we could say no for different reasons.
Going to Berea introduced me to the term Appalachian. Like, I didn't know what it was, had never heard of it, and grew up in Asheville in Western North Carolina, split between Buncombe County and Henderson County. And Henderson is a little bit more rural and outside of Asheville. But anyways, I didn't know, similar to y'all, until I came to Berea. And my closest friends at Berea had the exact same response that y'all do. And it was an automatic no for similar reasons. One of them, my bestie, being from Birmingham, and the other one, my other bestie, being from Cleveland. But I think, and I'm biased because I've been teaching Appalachian poets, and I am an Appalachian poet. And I've spoken with Dr. Turner, and exchanged emails and such, and I love and respect y'all. So gathering all these different perspectives around Appalachia and Appalachia, I think it really just is subjective. Like, if this is an identity that you can step into or that you can accept, then it is for you. And if it's something that you don't feel fits you or doesn't fit you from your lived experiences, then it doesn't. And I can't tell anyone that they're right or wrong based on their own lived experiences. But I can say that I know Frank S. Walker invented the term to fight the literature that was out there. I know one article by an unnamed former dean of Berea College specified that that the original definition of Appalachia should stay that way, and that we were wasting time and energy by mixing terms, and essentially rejecting like the entire concept of Appalachia. And one thing I can respect about it is that it is kind of forcing people of color into in a region that we're not associated with, but that we've always like been a part of. So Black people are not monolithic, as we all know, and there are a lot of different takes on it. So I appreciate y'all's responses. Do y'all remember the first time you were made aware of being African American, or was there ever a distinction?
I can remember the first time I was called the N-word. I was in Maryville, Tennessee. Ooh. I had not started to school yet, and what I did every morning, I would go to work with she was my biological maternal grandmother, but they eventually adopted me, so she would be my mother. I would go to work with her because there was no daycare or no preschool, and I can remember. I can tell you where I was. I can tell you what the white boy used the N-word, and I would always have to give credit to the white family. There was a white girl who, before I could say anything, because I really didn't know what the term meant. Okay, I'm being very honest. I just didn't know. But she corrected him and said, "We don't do that and don't say that." And that was the first time. But I guess after that, I don't know, I definitely felt it when I transferred to Alcoa High School my junior year, because both years I was there, they changed the rules. And so I could not be in the National Honor Society. I remember, but I always tried to say, and hopefully you remember, I said, know your past, but don't live in your past. Mm-hmm. So I remember that first time, even now. So I guess it did leave a scar or something there, but it did not stop me.
Thank you.
So,
I think the first time that, we knew, nobody had to say, look, you aren't the same and you can't do things they can do. I was really active in 4-H when I grew up, and I was good. I worked hard because I was taught that if you're going to do anything, you do it the best you know how. Mm-hmm. So I often won. And then one day, this friend of mine competed, and we had all worked together, and he had built a clock using batteries, and God only knows what else he put in it. But he did his presentation and his talk, didn't miss a beat, and he didn't win. And I said, Daddy, why didn't he win? He was way better than the little white boy. And my father said, I don't know. I can't really answer that truthfully for you. Why don't you ask the judge over there, why didn't he win? And like I say, naivety leads to not being afraid. And I walked up to him and asked him, I never did get an answer. I just got a whole lot of da. And I said, Daddy, he doesn't know. Couldn't even answer me. And of course, then my father told me, and I guess it hurt my feelings. And I really didn't understand why, because like I say, I usually won. So I was expecting him to win because he was good.
Right.
So that's a one I will always remember.
It's interesting that I think for us, as we go back down memory lane, we were very happy within, I think, our segregated Black communities.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not, when we talk about, Brown versus Board of Education, there were many Black schools that were definitely inferior, but there were also many that were better than the white schools.
We had the raggedy buildings, but academically, we were doing okay.
Because you have to remember that the teachers, because many of the teachers we had the doctorate degree. And I know it's off the subject, but you know about Lincoln Institute. Mm-hmm. I did some research, and in the 1950s and 60s, Lincoln Institute was the only accredited high school in Shelby County because it had the faculty that many of them, they were the ones that had the doctorate degree. So I guess the question is, I asked someone, how did you feel about going to a segregated school? And to a great degree, I think we would say we didn't think about it. No. Because we were in a segregated school, yes. We're in a segregated community, yes. But
academically, we could hold our own.
Yeah, our teachers, the teachers look like us. The cheerleaders look like us. The athletic teams, the academic teams were people like us. And so it was that sense of community. So I guess we knew that there was discrimination. We knew that there was racism. We knew there was prejudice. But it was a sense of community that helped us survive.
And I think that's what Andrew's friend meant when he said it gave him what he needed to survive Vietnam. Because you just do what you got to do.